Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission. This podcast is powered by Unreached Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.
Well, Jeannie Marie, you crossed the street and ended up on the other side of the world.
I did, and I love it here.
You like how I did that?
You're so creative.
I know. I kind of borrowed it from across the street and around the world. We're going to be giving a shameless plug here shortly about your book, which is really kind of taken off in many ways, wouldn't you say?
Yes. I think a lot of people are reading it and using it and doing it. That's what it's written for.
Which is probably gives you the most joy. I mean, you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
That's right.
Maybe not blood, sweat, and tears.
That's right. And late nights.
Late nights, early mornings might be otherwise stated. And to see people, well, isn't it just to see them purchasing and reading these words and being encouraged? Everyone's going to take it a different way, right? Respond differently.
That's right. And I'm getting notes and emails probably every other day. I just heard from a woman in Uganda who said, I'm reading this book as part of my internship training to reach out to refugees, and here's my book report.
Well, that's cool.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, that is just so exciting.
Yeah.
So encouraging. How many countries would you say your book has traveled to so far? Do you know?
Well, it is being offered on Amazon in India, Germany, Italy, France, and the US, UK, Canada.
So basically Amazon everywhere.
In the Western world.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I see. Mm-hmm. Okay, so make sure people head on over to Amazon, look up Across the Street Around the World. Is that the shameless plug we need to give?
Sure.
We'll probably do a few more along the way.
Okay, good.
Why did you write this book?
So I was 38 years old when I met my first Muslim.
Really?
I was, and I dragged my 2-year-old daughter an hour away from my white picket fence backyard to the city where I knew that Iraqi refugees were coming in. And I remember when Aisha walked out of the door, she was just dressed in black from head to toe. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And she said, "Why are you here?" And I told her, I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm just trying to do what he says. I know I'm supposed to welcome the foreigner. I know that I should probably meet Muslims because, love your enemy. You're the closest thing I have to an enemy. I don't even know you.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah. And
so this is still on American soil.
This is still on American soil.
Yeah.
And I just was I knew that God wanted me to do something with the nations, but I wanted to have it be personal, practical right then. And so she says to me, yes. And I said, I just want to help with refugees. And she said, yes, you can help.
Who is she? Is she just a Muslim woman, or is she running some sort of organization?
She's helping Sudanese refugees, actually, and Iraqi refugees come in and resettle.
I see.
And so she was Iraqi herself, a former refugee. And she said to me...
Still wearing full
Still
burqa.
wearing everything, yes. And so she said, yes, you can help. And I thought, okay, we're going to do a food collection campaign or clothing drive, and then we're going to all smile at each other and then go home. Instead, she says to me, if everything you're saying is true, then I want you to come to... I met a widow with 2 small children yesterday, or a couple weeks ago, who just came back from Iraq. Her husband was accidentally killed by American soldiers.
Wow.
And I want you to come to her apartment with me tomorrow and ask forgiveness from the American people.
Wow. Welcome to the introduction of Muslim or work among Islamic peoples.
Yes, and just work globally and just following God to the nations. All of a sudden I understood that it was going to be so much bigger and so much more fascinating, and to follow Jesus, that's a subtitle, Follow Jesus to the Nations in your neighborhood and beyond. And so then it catapulted me into friendships with many Muslims and other peoples coming to our country, and then international students. And then eventually my husband and I had to explore what lay beyond, and we sold everything we had. We're successful business people, and we moved to a chaotic Muslim country in India, a city of 1 million by the sea. And I recognized when we moved back that there were so many other people like me who are just ordinary people who want to change the world.
Are you an ordinary person?
I am an ordinary person. I look pretty ordinary, don't I?
Yeah, but So I think that's the problem. Don't you think that's the problem, though? I mean, you're on YouTube right now, but you are an ordinary person, and other people can do or what you've done, or maybe just following these footsteps.
That's right. That's right. Because I'm a mom with 4 kids and a husband who works in the corporate world. Now, I did grow up overseas, so I do have this this natural draw.
Third culture kid. Yeah.
Yes, but I also have made lots of mistakes in my work trying to do things in the nations.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write a book that would help just ordinary people like this not make the same mistakes I did.
Yeah.
And also be able to make friends with just their neighbor who happens to be Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim.
And when you say happens to be, it is such a bigger thing right now. Had you have said this in the 50s, I mean, a couple generations ago, we're not even having this conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
Suddenly, all the nations are at our doorstep. And that's why I love both the title and the subtitle, Cross the Street. I mean, literally, people can cross the street meet their... I was recently in Fremont, California.
Okay.
Very close friends of ours. They're on our board with Unreached Global. And we came to their house, and we were staying right off of jet lag, a little bit of a space cadet at the time. Their whole neighborhood, at one point, one generation ago, was predominantly white. And suddenly, Pakistani, Filipino, Indonesian, Chinese, they are like the only Caucasians on the street.
Wow.
And suddenly the nations are at their doorstep. They love it. They're embracing it wholeheartedly. They go across their street all the time. Rarely around the world. Their son does.
Yeah.
But they're only able to go across the street. And I think a lot of people can probably resonate with that, following Jesus to the nations and in your neighborhood and beyond.
Yeah, because we just look at who we're working with. We look at our grocery stores. We look at our kids' friends in their classrooms.
Yeah.
And they are from nations that have primarily unreached people groups. I mean, there are Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, formerly communist Chinese right near us. I bet you every one of our listeners knows someone. And most of the time, people don't know how to start.
Yeah, I was
how
going to say.
How to open up a conversation.
What do you do? You go down to the local, Lucky Dragon Chinese restaurant? How do you start?
Right. So, in my first chapter, I even give just a 10 tips to just how to find a friend.
Such a teaser. You're not even going to tell us an option right now.
One?
If you want one, we'll give you one. The rest, the other 9, you go on Amazon.
That's right. I'll tell you. You just hit on one of them is to eat at all the ethnic restaurants in your city.
Dude, you're going to
go to Vietnamese, Thai. Not Italian. That doesn't count.
Is that American?
There you go.
Get some pho at your local Vietnamese joint. Get some sticky pot stickers. I speak Chinese, so I can't say the stuff in English anymore. I wanted to say jiaozi.
That's right. Yeah, and we usually go, and we do it intentionally. So I say that if you want to meet people like this, you will have to be intentional. You will have to go out of your way to actually have a conversation. And so I say go in the middle of the week when it's not so busy, and you go to a small family-owned place, and I can pretty much get invited into someone's house, even in the U.S. After an hour of conversation, because
they have that aspect of hospitality that Americans have lost in the last couple of maybe one generation, perhaps more like 2. That strong hospitality, discluding the South, where I think it's still quite strong.
Yes,
but overall, generally speaking, Americans have lost that hospitality. And you're saying you could walk into an ethnic restaurant of probably almost any kind.
Yes.
And be invited to their house within a few visits?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's happened. Yeah.
So where have you been invited? People from where?
Yeah, so from Pakistan.
Okay.
And India, of course.
Okay.
And those are the 2 main ones that I usually try to concentrate because that's where my background is.
Okay.
And Muslims as well. It's my favorite now because my friend catapulted me into this whole world. So here's a quick tip for everyone. If you see someone that's covered with a hijab, you can contribute to world peace by going up to her and just saying, Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.
Just hello.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. And I have like that in my book, like just little simple tips.
Yes.
And you will be amazed. The smile, the conversation that you'll have just by bridging A very small thing.
So you don't have to speak Arabic.
No,
but
just say peace be on you. That's how they say hello.
Assalamu alaikum. She'll respond alaikum assalam, I think, right?
Yep, and then you don't even have to know the response.
No.
And they say,
but then you continue this conversation.
And they say, how do you know this? And you say, well, I read this book and it said I should try this. That's how simple it is.
Jeannie Marie told me. Shouldn't every Christian... I guess that's the question. I was going to say, shouldn't every Christian be doing this? But then I thought, why should every Christian be doing this? Why are you saying people need to be intentional about going to eat at their ethnic restaurants? What is the point? What's this underlying motivation behind all this?
What really struck me, and this was when I was mid-30s. I had already been living overseas, grown up, but I did not understand that the Bible from the beginning to the end, that's God's story, is him drawing every nation to himself, every people group. He wants someone from every ethnic people group to actually be part of his family, to be part of the kingdom of God. And there are too many of them that do not have access to this good news. They do not have access. Several billion people in the world.
I'm going to pause you right there because I'm pretty familiar with these statistics, but you just said there's several billion people who have never heard of Jesus.
Yes.
Is that really true in the 21st century?
Isn't that just the craziest thing? So just an example, I was in southern Bangladesh. 10 million people. I was doing a survey. I'm a strategist for an international company that sends people to about 50 Muslim countries in the world. And so I was doing a survey at this group of 10 million people. So just as an example, Arizona has 6 million people. Okay. So this is just, a lot of people as a whole.
The one city you're in has 10 million. Is that what you said?
So
or the
this
whole province?
is it 5 districts, like a province, right? But we did a tour with several people. We spent 2 weeks looking, and we found one believer that was actually reaching out to all these Bengalis, right? Intentionally reaching out and telling about Jesus. One, and then there was one like Christian hospital. But other than that, we never found any other believers.
First of all, a Christian hospital, they're probably not evangelizing people. It's probably just missionaries who set it up in the past. Well, why couldn't they just flip on the radio and listen to a Christian broadcast or get, T.D. Jakes on there?
Yeah, why doesn't God just use only that? He does use that.
But I'm saying, is there even that?
So, in Bangladesh, you might be able to, but only in Dhaka, maybe in the big cities. But also, isn't it like God that he asks us to be, we have to see the kingdom of God in action. We have to see people. We have to see their face.
Yes.
And how are we going to change centuries of a worldview that we believed is true forever unless we see it lived out in front of us by someone who can demonstrate peace and purpose and God's favor on them.
I think that's what you're good at doing as well. You're talking about the unreached. People have no access, and there's kind of this mass conglomerate of people who are nameless and faceless, and they don't really resonate with me because I don't know who they are. You're talking in general terms. Can you tell me about a couple of the individuals? How have this big picture, the unreached, you talk about, every nation. It makes me think of Revelation 7:9. Every tongue, nation, tribe, people, every ethno-linguistic person dressed in white, waving palm branches, worshiping with the 4 living creatures and the elders bowing. It's this crazy story of what is to be in the future. But break it down for me so it's more palpable. What are some instances?
Yeah, well, that is why I write so many stories in here about individual people. And my first thing for people who want to have a part in this is to make a face, get a face that's a friend with one of these nations. Because until I met Aisha, and I could see her and see that she was like me, she's one of my best friends now, I love her. And now Muslims are Aisha, and I can see her, And so I say, if you make a friend that's putting a face that's a friend to a scary word like Muslims, or a big word like unreached, suddenly all the statistics go away.
It kind of melts away.
Yeah.
I remember when this happened for me in meaningful ways. I think I was living in China. I moved there I was 18 years old. Started smuggling Bibles from Hong Kong to China a year before. Oh, actually a couple of years before that, when I was 15, with Teen Mania Ministries from Lewis Acquire the Fire youth conventions. 18, I moved to China, and it was China. I did not know China. It was just this massive group of people, 1.2 probably billion at that time, now 1.4. But I remember having these moments and connections and intersecting moments, divine encounters really, with the gate guard, who would have these small conversations in passing, and then Mrs. Ding, who was 65 years old, my Chinese teacher, she could not say anything more than hello, okay, I love you, and bye-bye. And I'm studying Chinese 22 hours a week with her. That was not easy. I'll give you a Chinese lesson later. And but yes, China became Mrs. Ding and the gate guard and Chris Fan, and all these people. And I like that you could, besides going to an ethnic restaurant and people's, doorstep, international students at a college campus, that's the first thing I think
of. So I am telling you, there are 1 million international students in the U.S. studying. And then take UK, Canada, and Australia. They're all coming to us, and over half of them are Saudi and Indian and Chinese. So
they wouldn't get by sheer numbers alone, right?
Yeah.
Indian and China.
Exactly, because there's so many. But they're influential, they're wealthy, they're going to go back to their country, and they're going to run their country, run their governments and their businesses. And so, we got really involved with international students, and that's so much fun because you can actually just go to your international university and you can say, I just like to have them come for holiday dinners, like a Thanksgiving dinner. And that's what we would do. And they would come over and be able to experience some of our culture and in our home, and our kids are hanging out with them.
Natural. So it sounds so natural.
It was just, it's very easy and it's super fun. And then, also international students are lonely. They're just college students. And
I was going to say, many of them have probably never been invited into the home of an American. They're living on American soil, right? But they've never been in the home of an American.
They say about 80% of international students that come will never enter an American home.
No way.
Let alone a believing home. And so it's a beautiful thing when we can do that. I had a friend who actually made friends with a couple of students from China and stayed with them their whole 4 years. They went back to actually came to follow Jesus, and the brother baptized the other brother. Wow. And then 10 years later, my friend was telling me that, I'm going to their wedding because they flew us all, expenses paid, to China to be part of our one of the brothers' weddings. And so you never know. You never know what's going to happen.
And who these people are. Because I think you're describing the unreached, and you talk about the 1040 window, you talk about poverty. 8 out of 10 of the poorest of the poor live in this area of the world. And yet the international students, the people who come representing unreached people groups or unengaged tribes perhaps, they are a little bit unique because they're the influential ones.
That's right.
Sons and daughters of sultans and kings many times. Unassuming, you have no idea about that.
That's right.
But they probably own a Lamborghini back in Saudi.
The people that actually flew the planes in 9/11 were actually international students in the U.S., some of them. What if you and I had invited them to our homes? What if they'd seen actually the face of a person who follows Jesus? How could this have been different?
So you're telling me that 9/11 might not have happened had those people been invited? I mean, sure, that's a big thing to say.
Who knows?
Can people really shift eternity or shift history because of these small invitations?
I believe so. And everyone can do it.
And it starts from crossing the street.
From crossing the street. It takes a little bit of courage.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of intentionality. I mean, even in the second chapter of my book, I talk about how to enter other cultures well, even in our home countries, how to offer the hospitality, how to make time in our schedule so that, especially as Americans, we're busy and we don't have enough time for all this stuff, And people from Eastern cultures, they like to spend time. They like to eat with you. And also unplanned, one of the tips that I have is to create unplanned time because we schedule things. So I used to schedule 1 day a week to go and visit my refugee friends. I would leave that day open. That was I schedule a block.
So you scheduled an unscheduled
time. And I would go down there and not have a plan And then I'm spending time taking them on a bus, teaching them how to use the public transportation system, to the library. Maybe I get a cooking class, but as Americans, we have to do some of these things in order to make it possible for us to be hospitable, to have time in our schedule to be with them.
We're talking mostly about crossing the street, perhaps around the world, for the sake of these people, for the Saudis, for the Chinese, for the Indians, and then some transformative thing takes place in their life. Perhaps they meet the Lord, they see the gospel in action. What does it do to the people who take those few steps? Is there some transformative aspect in our own life that we experience just by going to meet these new cultures?
Isn't it true? Suddenly we see that we're talking with people who maybe they haven't experienced actually Jesus in all his beauty and the peace and then like my one friend Aisha, I decided I was having so much fun with my friends, I would often forget to be spiritually intentional, and so I just asked her, will you study the Bible? Will you read the Bible with me? Have you ever read the Bible? Would you read the Bible with me? And she said yes, and we would read, and I would learn so much from her. So my own view also of God and of the world and of how the Bible could be read through, like, let's say, an honor shame lens versus like a guilt sin lens, which is like a Western view. I learned a lot.
So you're reading the Bible with a Muslim. She's not yet a Christian. Maybe she still is not. But you're learning from
Absolutely.
the worldview through which she's reading the Bible.
This is an example. We're reading Abraham.
Okay.
And
who's very much a part of the Islamic faith.
That's right. So
Yes.
our prophets are the same.
Yes.
And so that's why they're willing to kind of study some of the stories are the same.
Injil.
Injil, that's right. And so we're reading about Abraham, and God says Abraham, and Abraham says, here I am. And she's reading in Arabic, and I'm in English, and she goes, oh, Jeannie, that does not just mean here I am. Hey, I'm over here. Like, come over and see me.
Right.
She goes, that means labayak. And in Arabic, it means I say yes before you even ask the question.
Wow, really?
So goosebumps. Yeah. And I'm like, wow. And she's like, yes. Oh, yes. When God speaks and says our name, we have to say yes before we even ask the question.
That's
he
what
even
she
asked the
says to
question.
you.
That's what she says to me. And so we both determined that week, when we felt God prompting us to do something, we would say yes without even knowing the question. So we're trying to follow the ways of God, and then we go into Jesus, and we're trying to read and then do what he says, which is really what God wants us to do.
That's remarkable. I hear a couple things in that. Linguistically, how there is so much a richness that you learn simply from an understanding of different languages, right? She notices these nuances. Had you been reading from the Amplified Bible or the Message, maybe you would have picked up on it, right?
Right.
But we don't always see the deeper meaning. Yeah. And also how Muslims particularly, I would say, but other faiths as well, Hindus, and they are brushing up against the divine at all time. So the spirit world and the tangible physical world, the physical and the metaphysical are always brushing up against each other. We compartmentalize them very
That's
well,
right.
I would
That's
say,
right.
in the Western world. But they know, in China, for example, I've been in many villages where they're killing pigs, killing a chicken, offering it to the hungry ghosts, lighting firecrackers so that their crops will succeed and their babies will not die and the sickness doesn't come. They're appeasing the hungry ghosts, so they call it, trying to find some sort of sacrifice to appease the gods. I say all of that because it helps us see the reality of the kingdom that is alive and at work at present. The big K kingdom, God's kingdom in our midst. Would you say you've seen that?
Yes, and I would also say, like, just to bring it down to the level of all our listeners who maybe don't have sacrificing pigs, right, in their backyard. But the idea is that sometimes we're afraid to bring up spiritual conversations. Westerners, we just don't talk about, that's just like, But in Easterners, that is like talking about the weather. And so it's so much a part of their lives that's why it really is easy to say to somebody, have you ever read the Bible? Would you like to read it with me? Do you want to honor God? Let's read it and learn how to honor God together. Because the spiritual, the physical, everything's together and it's not weird.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's been my whole adult experience. The not weird. It's so normal. We recently had a team here, and they came to minister to our local missionaries who are Chinese and tribal Chinese within Reach Global. And they kept prefacing all their prayers and prophetic words that they wanted to speak by asking, is it okay if I share this? Or can I put my hand on your shoulder? And I was like, just put your hand on their shoulder and talk to them.
It's just people.
Yeah, but we need to make sure we have that allowance to get past that boundaries, that space between us. Whereas, yeah, you're right. People can wrap their arms around each other and say, what is happening in your spiritual life today?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so normal. Yeah. Which brings me to, as soon as people start, trying to make friends across the street, they're going to start getting a little bit of a desire to see what lies beyond. We have several million people a year in America taking short-term trips, right? And so I really wanted to really make sure in this book to help people to see that there's 3 different kinds of trips. And they could be doing some of the same things that they were doing here, right, on these trips. But like vision trips where we go and we don't expect that we're going to do in 10 days what it takes 10 years to do.
Yeah. So you don't come in with this mentality like, I am going to fix everything, the social justice warrior.
Yes, and I'm going to alleviate poverty, and I'm going to plant 50,000 churches, and
all in 10 days.
we can't have that expectation. We don't check the box, right? So a lot of what I call it a vision trip, But then we have professionals that can also say, I have a skill, and I'm going to team up with a long-term worker that is living there, loving people, learning the language. They're doing all the hard work. And I'm going to come over and offer, maybe my business consulting to help them with a Kingdom business, or an IT, I'm going to help them with their computer stuff or whatever. I'm going to take care of their kids. And we can bless people using our professional skills. That's the second type of trip. And then a third type of trip is a survey trip, which is my favorite. And I think you do those too. Where we're going into, and I'm throwing this out because some people are going to be listening and going, okay, I can make friends with people and stuff, but man, I want to go. Yeah. I want to go. Like, get me out there.
Yeah, well, some people are just geared that way. They want to see the world and understand cultures.
Yeah, and they want to go to the hardest places. And I think I believe that a few people, well, we have to have more people than a few, but are made to do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
so what's a survey trip? What would they survey?
Yeah, so I go to places where I know from research that there are no long-term workers living there, like offering Jesus in winsome ways to church planning, and where there's millions and millions of people who don't have access to Jesus. Wow. We go, we survey, and we land, and we do a trip where we try to see if people can live and land and learn there, and how could foreigners enter, and what businesses could they do. And
I recently did, it was very different from that kind of survey.
Okay.
By the way, I would have to point out that people should probably go to joshuaproject.net. If you talk about survey or data, or how are people supposed to know where to start if they want to do a survey like that? But joshuaproject.net has been an organization, I think 20 years now, that I've kind of referred to over the many years in China when I would want to go to these unreached, sometimes unengaged villages. Pull up Joshua Project, it tells you the history, the language, the culture, the percentage of Christians and non-Christians in a particular area. And then you could say, oh, wow, there's like 0.0%.
You really ought to look at that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting place.
So that is exactly what we did. We started looking at these groups, and we started praying over them. So you don't have to go anywhere. You just pray for a while. You pray, and you pray, and you pray, and you ask God, what does God want for these people, this people group? And when my husband and I and a group at our church started praying for several people groups, there was the one that we ended up moving to, that we said, well, we got to go check this out, because...
So should we put a disclaimer there? If you're going to start praying...
You could be going.
Because prayer is the mighty engine that is to move the missionary force, a statement that was said in the turn of the 20th century, the student volunteer movement. Prayer is the mighty engine that is to move the missionary force. You cannot underestimate the power of your prayers. I think sometimes they are underestimated because the goers are the heroes, and, well, no, we are all part of this bigger picture that God is doing. If you're an intercessor or a prayer warrior, man, that is what you have got to be doing. But disclaimer, you might catch so much a heart of God that, like you said, buy a one-way plane ticket to Timbuktu or somewhere
never
else.
come back. That's right. I mean, I was not much of a prayer actually, but I knew that it was important. And when I started praying, I started doing less talking and more listening and started to grow in that. And now I love to pray. Now people look at me and talk about me as I'm a prayer person, and it always makes me laugh.
They endorse you on LinkedIn as a prayer warrior.
That's
Like,
right.
that's not
I'm like,
right.
wow, I never knew that. But it's because when you start listening to God about these people groups, He starts showing you things that He wants to do there. And then you're like, okay, well, how's He going to do that?
You start kind of gathering resources. By the way, another, going back to Joshua Project, because it's not just numbers and data. They also have that app. Do you have it? Unreached of the Day.
No. Is that Prayercast?
No, it's Joshua Project, Unreached of the Day,
Okay.
and it pops up just like Joshua Project instead of scouring the whole website. Boing, 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 365. I think it loops or continues because there's more than 365 groups. And today's prayer points are the, Kumu of China.
So then you start getting more. Okay, I got to tell you something. In this book, did you know that I interrupted you?
Can you hold that up?
Yeah.
By the way,
Did I tell you that I coined a new term in the missiological world?
Ooh.
Okay. I know. It's called MQ.
Okay.
Missional
Yes.
intelligence.
Your MQ.
MQ. You're increasing your MQ. And you have just done that now for your whole audience, is you're increasing their MQ, which we have cultural intelligence, CQ, we have IQ, of course, and EQ, emotional intelligence. But missional intelligence is what is it going to take to reach the whole world? What's it going to take? And we start realizing that strategy is spiritual. So I have a whole chapter on that actually in here, because I didn't realize that strategy could be spiritual. And when we pray, we use data. And we actually, so I'm calling the strategic thinkers into the game.
Good. Okay.
So
you looking out, let's make some generalizations
Sure.
here. I like generalizations. And data, 73% of statistics are made up on the spot, they say. So
okay, I think we could make up a few ourselves right here.
you're standing there looking out at all of Christendom, the Christian world. Overview, what do you think their MQ is? What do you think their missional or mission
Missional intelligence?
intelligence is?
I would say those who have taken the perspectives course probably have very high missional intelligence.
Okay. Perspectives on the World Christian
Perspectives
Movement.
on the World Christian Movement. It's offered all over the world. Perspectives.org.
Yep, I point people to all the time.
That's right. And there's variations of it. Kairos.
Yes.
And Pathways is something I'm on the board of. And so those people actually probably have high missional intelligence.
Okay.
I would say the more people go out and do this work, they start to get it because they realize things don't work, and then they're like, why didn't it work?
Short-term trips, long-term.
So it depends if they're well trained.
Okay, yeah.
People who are
Short-term
well
trips could be
trained
a
on
major
short-term
flop.
trips, they can get high missional intelligence if they're trained well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think to be blunt about this, you're describing very small remnant of the Christian world.
Yeah,
I know you said
probably.
there's a million of people going out on mission trips around the world.
A couple million,
right?
too.
A couple
Yeah.
million. I don't know the exact numbers, but our population, let's say in America alone, 350 million, and then globally Christians around the world. So I'll be a bully about it, sorry, and ask you again.
What's the percentage?
I mean, are we, seriously?
I'm not going to say percentage because
okay.
I'm a positivity person.
Yeah, okay. But
no, but that
we have room for growth.
So much room for growth.
Yeah.
And honestly, that is a huge reason why I wrote this book, because this book is written for ordinary people who probably don't have high missional intelligence, but they have some passion. They have a spark.
Yes.
But it's kind of couched in here. So you're not going to get a bunch of really statistics, but by the time you're done reading it, you're going to have high missional intelligence because it's about reaching Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, formerly communist people groups.
Yeah, and so you start to just speak the lingo. You know, it reminds me, I'm so happy that you did write this book because to me, as I was writing my books, I look at the missionary biography that has largely disappeared from Christian bookstores, no doubt, but anywhere books are sold. Okay, even a remnant of people writing missionary biographies or, Jim and Elizabeth Elliott's, the Eternity in Their Hearts, Don Richardson.
Yeah. So good.
It's
totally shaped my
transformative.
Yeah.
Bruchko.
Yeah.
These were stories that I kind of grew up with.
Yeah,
My dad
me
would
too.
read them to me, and I mean, I wasn't living abroad. I wasn't an MK. I was sitting in Prescott, Arizona. We're just down the street from you.
Sure,
by the way.
yeah.
I grew up in Prescott, Arizona, and yet today I look at the online books and what's trending. Missions biographies are not. And so I like that you're challenging the MQ, mission intelligence. You call it mission or missional?
Missional intelligence,
Okay.
MQ. And then the last half of the book actually is all about, you talk about biographies and, people who have gone before. So I use actually more current stories, but it's all about now that you have this knowledge, you have some experience, you have a face that's a friend from a nation, maybe you've gone on a short-term trip. Most of the time people are asking themselves, well, could I be one of those people that are like these people you're talking about? And so I spend the last 4 chapters really talking about people wrestling with personalities, gifting, calling, and then how do we surrender the American dream of comfort, safety, financial security? And then the last part is how can we get emotionally healthy so that when we offer Jesus, we offer it in a winsome way.
What do you mean by winsome way?
A winsome way. Actually, that is one of my chapters. We just skipped over it.
I noticed, I saw the chapter title, Winsome Way, and I'm asking facetiously or rhetorically, but what do you mean, show Jesus in a winsome way? That's not the typical way of evangelism that I've heard described.
Yes, I want to offer Jesus so that it's beautiful, so that it's like a gift, so that it can be received and it can be heard. And I think there's too many. Often we build walls instead of bridges. And so Jesus was always good news. Yeah. He was good news to people.
Yes.
And
probably not wearing the placard, turn and burn, or God
that's
hates
right.
fags,
Yes.
pardon my French.
Yes. And even simple things like, with Muslims, we don't wear crosses because they think of the Crusades. And so we honor and we present Jesus. Of course, we present that piece of what he did for us on the cross with the shame. He took our shame, but he also took our loneliness. He took our pain. He took so much, and that's good news. But just simple things like that. We offer Jesus so that he's good, so that good news is actually good.
When you share Jesus in that winsome way, it transforms your presentation. The momentum of how you even share. You would take off a cross before sharing with a Muslim. You would do certain things that realize, wow, that might not be received well if I do it in this manner. And so it transforms you in the process. But you just said, and we're talking about the gospel as being good news. The gospel is good news. And it does remind me of the statement, I think it was Carl F.H. Henry, a missionary of the past. He said, gospel is only good news if it gets there in time. That's always struck me because I want the good news, the gospel, to be good news always. And it is unchanging. God is unchanging. His love does not fade like the shifting shadows of the moon. But if the gospel is only good news if it gets there in time, you mentioned a few billion people who have never had access. What is the baseline? The thing that God is calling us simply to do? Is it to really go cross cultures? What is the underlying motivation? I keep trying to get there. Why do we need to do the things you're talking about in your book? What is the underlying drive here?
Yeah, I start with and end with the idea that we need to spend so much time with Jesus personally that he can speak to us. And he cares about people who are not going to have the opportunity to know him. And the more time we spend with Jesus, the more time we abide with him, the more time that we are listening and praying, he is going to push us out of the current circle that we're in.
No, God, no.
Yes, he's good. And it's going to be exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so you're saying it is a positive thing when that
It's
happens.
a positive thing. All of a sudden you see that God is alive. He is not dead.
Yeah.
And miracles happen. And you pray with people and they get healed. And all of a sudden you're like... And then you realize, like my heart and I think yours too, for sure, like, is I am burdened for people that will not have the opportunity to stand before the God of heaven, shoulder to shoulder with all of us. And I just don't think that's fair. It's not fair. It's an injustice. Yeah. Okay. So here's my soapbox, right?
Okay.
So I'm a strategist for India and Bangladesh. So one state in India, one state has 200 million people. The U.S. has 300 million. Okay. So one state is almost a whole country.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
0.1%. 0.1, not even above 0.1%,
yes.
Would identify as followers of Jesus.
Really?
So all Muslim and Hindu. And I will tell you, because we send workers there, we have 3 teams and probably only double that. And so that's not fair. And we have the light of the gospel. We have the blessing, and we get the opportunity to pass it on. Mm-hmm. And so there are people, we can all have a role in it.
Yes.
But also some people need to go.
I think so many times we hear about the Great Commission going out. Mm-hmm. It sounds like, well, we hear things like, it's the Great Commission, not the Great Suggestion. I say that all the time. But you hear kind of this aggressive, semi-angry God saying, I'm sending you out. Maybe we've seen that wrong in the past. Mm-hmm. Perhaps what it is more is Jesus welcoming us to join him on this grand adventure.
That's right.
That is transforming and changing people's mm-hmm. lives. And it's so exciting, difficult. The reason
really
we're not
hard.
going to these areas is because they are...
Because it's hard. There's a reason why there's not a lot of people there. It's hard.
Yeah. David Platt,
mm-hmm.
author of Radical, and
mm-hmm.
He says the only places that are unreached are the hard and difficult places.
That's right.
They're unreached for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. That kind of calls the Frodo inside of me. All these superheroes with some thing to do to transform the world. I feel it arising. I want to be part of that grand narrative.
Yes, and I also. Because what you're talking about is that we should go to the nations, it commands it. That speaks to what I call the personality type of the obedient disciple, which is a good thing. But there are other personality types. I created these new personality types in here.
So you've got
I even have a quiz.
So you got an Enneagram equivalent and an IQ test.
That's right. That's right. And it's the idea that, we think, we should do this. Well, that does not speak to me because I am not that personality type. But there's a meaning and purpose person where all you have to do is say to me, there's a cause and you're valuable and we need your unique skills to go. Come on, let's have a passion. There's the bleeding heart. Hey, most of the world that is unreached, that don't have Jesus, they're also living in poverty and in social injustice. So we need the bleeding hearts to go. We need the strategic thinkers, which we've already touched on.
Yes.
We need the people that have this mind that says, okay, if this is all of this, here's where we need to go, that kind of thing. And of course the obedient disciples. They're the ones that last because they're saying, I'm going to persevere, I'm going to stay there, I'm going to do it.
I love that. I love that you're also empowering all these different personalities.
Yeah.
God made us. He knit us together in our mother's mm-hmm. womb. He knew every facet about us before we were even born. I don't think the call to serving Jesus both at home and abroad is to deny who we are as an individual. Yes. It only enhances it.
Yes.
So if someone is an IT guy in whatever company, we'll call him a geek. All right? Yeah. Shout out to the geeks.
Yeah,
because I could be one of you every once in a while. But it doesn't mean that you're suddenly on this soapbox as the evangelist in your public square. No, I mean, you're not going to last long doing that if you switch roles so polarizing that it doesn't suit your personality. Instead, wouldn't God call you to do something that would be utilizing the way he initially created
Absolutely.
you?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter on identity, on how we have to get away from the view that we're going to go live in a tribe somewhere in a hut, mm-hmm. right? Most of the world is urban now, actually. And so, and to get into these countries that we're talking about, you can't just walk in on a religious visa anymore. So you're going to be a real businessman. If we got businessmen out there and women, like go be an entrepreneur or go apply in Saudi Arabia with your profession that you have your education in, and go live there, be a student, go study in Arabic University or in Khartoum, maybe. I don't know. Can you do that?
Because there's facets of every kind of job description that you could be used. Yeah. I'm hearing a heavy draw. You're calling people to Saudi Arabia.
I just said that. I'm India. Okay, not India, Saudi Arabia, but
I'm hearing Middle East heavy.
I have said that. Yeah. So India and Bangladesh. I got to think of some examples there, right?
This is really poising people for a story that is going to be told.
That's right.
It's not that living in America is bad in any way. Many people will be called to stay in their own home countries, the majority. But I think we all have oftentimes a myopic worldview.
Yes.
And I've said it on this podcast before. We describe it in Chinese as Jingdi Zhiwa, the frog in the bottom of the well. The Jingdi Zhiwa, the frog is looking up at a little blue dot. That's his whole horizon.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we associate with people who are look like us and talk like us and think like us. And so our perspective does not broaden. Well, that's fair and okay for a while, but you don't get the bigness of John 3:16 that God first so loved the world, the bigger picture, the macro. Zoom out, 50,000 foot view. Suddenly, when the water of the Holy Spirit falls into that well and raises you up, your perspective transforms. It's a macro picture. Everything I'm describing, it excites me. I hope it excites people who are watching, because
that's right.
I'm like, I want to go overseas. Well, no, we're shooting this in Chiang Mai, Thailand.
That's right. So go make a friend first, right? And because it's not all just that, but eventually, yes, we want retired people to go and do these professional trips.
And not only that, we have a need for retired folks in our organization right now as moms, dads, grandpa, mentor figures.
That's right. Yeah, so there's a role for everyone to have this kind of excitement that you and I are like, let's go.
Should we do some a pose right now for the main background of the YouTube?
There you go.
That's how excited we are.
Yeah.
You'll see that on the default image of YouTube.
You go.
I'm so happy that you wrote this book. I'm so happy that here you are, Chiang Mai, Thailand, traveling the world, being a part of this grand narrative. I like to call it grand narrative because I'm always drawn to that scripture that says, all the days, Psalm 139, all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. For an author, I think people like that kind of stuff. I'm writing this book and I don't exactly know where the narrative, the character is going to go. But all the days in God's story, all these narratives, he's already he knows. And yet he gives us free will. And we can choose to say, not so interested in your story, God. Or we could say, no, I really want to stand on your feet.
I want to be part of it.
I want to stand on your feet and see where you take me.
Yeah.
What would be your final encouragement for people who are listening? They're getting encouraged, getting inspired, maybe a little bit scared of the first step. What would be your simple encouragement for them?
I would say have courage, have compassion, and do something right now, today. Start small, start soon, start somewhere, start right where you are. And you'll see this amazing path that God is going to take you on. And it's going to be fun and it's going to be exciting and you're going to grow and the Holy Spirit's going to fill you and buy the book.
The final encouragement.
There you go, buy the book.
I like that your final encouragement is take a step of action. Yeah. Because I think many times, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. I feel like all I'm doing is quoting my old China studies.
There you go.
Confucianism in this whole podcast. But action. Even when you mention compassion, it's not just some empathy for those poor people over there somewhere. Right. It's love in action. That's what compassion is. And I pray that your conversation today, and especially your book, is going to inspire that. I'm excited to meet you for the first time.
That's exciting.
Give a little shout out across the street and around the world. Following Jesus to the Nations in Your Neighborhood and Beyond by Jeannie Marie.
And it is a practical book. It's
Yeah.
meant to be done. I should mention also that there is a free quiz called assessment called growtogotest.com. Growtogotest.com.
Growtogotest.com.
Growtogotest.com. It's 50 questions that will just show you if you're a starter, a grower, or a goer, and where you are and how you can grow.
Awesome.
And some tips and things that you can do.
Let's make that the first step then.
Okay.
The first. Go to
growtogotest.com. There you go.
And see where you kind of fall. Maybe how you're bent or your inclination
how you're bent.
is.
Yeah.
And then, but after that, I'm just really encouraged and inspired because I think this is really shifting worldviews, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yes.
Calling people into the biggerness of God's story. We've already said it before, Revelation 7:9. There standing before the throne of God was every nation, tongue, tribe, and people. They're clothed in white, holding palm branches. Maybe it sounds a little funny to us because we're modern folks. But really what it's getting at, I think, is worship. And God deserves this glory from every ethno-linguistic people, and many of them have not had a chance to hear. And so in the meantime, because worship exists forever, we have to do this makeshift thing called mission. And that's not going to last forever. Not going to be going out to unreached people groups in heaven. But in the meantime, we got to be part of a grand narrative. So I'm happy that you are part of it and helping call other people into the story.
Thank you for having me. Yes. It's been a fun conversation.
I agree. Thank you so much, Jeannie Marie.
All right.
Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.